immediately hand their energy to the world through their phone, their worries, or the noise around them. But what if the first 30 minutes of your day determined not just your mood, but your relationships, your health, even your future? You don't need a miracle morning. You need a meaningful morning, one that returns you to your center before the world pulls you apart. In silence, movement, breath, and presence, there lies your power. When a person opens their eyes in the morning, they stand at a crossroads. One path leads into unconscious repetition. The habitual reaching for the phone, the rush to beat time, the mind already flooded with yesterday's worries. The other path is subtler, quieter. It asks for awareness. It doesn't shout. It simply waits to be chosen. That second path begins not with noise, but with stillness. And while it may appear passive to the untrained eye, stillness in the morning is not inactivity. It is the beginning of mastery. Imagine this: a woman wakes just before dawn. She does not reach for her phone. She does not speak. She simply sits at the edge of her bed, allowing the silence to settle around her. In those first 5 minutes, she is not doing, she is being. She listens to the breath. She feels the weight of her body supported by the earth. And in this space, something remarkable happens. She remembers herself, not the version the world knows, not the roles she plays as mother, partner, professional, but the deeper self that is always there, just beneath the surface of distraction. Stillness is not a lack of motion, it is the fullness of presence. In the early hours, the mind is like soft clay. It will take the imprint of whatever you offer it. If you offer it stillness, it will absorb peace. If you offer it urgency, it will harden into tension. Neuroscience affirms this reality. When we begin the day with calm awareness, we reduce the morning spike in cortisol, that stress hormone that quietly rules so much of our behavior. Cortisol prepares the body for reaction, for defense. But when we instead ground ourselves in quiet observation, we prepare the body and mind for intention. This first morning habit, waking in stillness, is not a productivity hack. It is a soul practice. 1 minute of intentional silence can reveal more about your life than an hour of rushed thought. Why? Because in silence, the noise of ego has nowhere to hide. The mind can no longer distract itself with tasks or validation. It must sit in its own presence. And from this space, insight emerges. This is why ancient traditions always valued the early morning hours as sacred. The veil between the conscious and unconscious is thin. What you think, feel, and focus on in that time sets the tone for your entire emotional experience. There is a man who once shared that he used to wake each morning with dread. His thoughts immediately raced to what could go wrong, to the conflicts he hadn't resolved, to the disappointments that lingered like fog from the day before. But after learning to begin his mornings in silence, everything changed. He gave himself 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, to sit, breathe, and notice. At first, the silence was uncomfortable. His mind fought it. But over time, he realized that his anxiety wasn't caused by the day. It was caused by his entry into the day. The stillness didn't remove his responsibilities, but it gave him space to approach them with steadiness. His relationships improved. His tone softened. He stopped carrying the tension of yesterday into every conversation of today. Stillness creates space, and in that space, we find freedom. Freedom to respond rather than react. Freedom to listen without defensiveness. Freedom to see the difference between what is urgent and what is important. And perhaps most importantly, stillness becomes a mirror. It reflects back to us our own emotional habits, some of which may no longer serve us. When we talk about success, many imagine achievement, accomplishment, and recognition. But the deeper success, the kind that nourishes not just the bank account, but the soul, begins with how we treat ourselves in the quiet, moments. How we breathe, how we pause, how we choose to carry ourselves before the world asks anything of us. One woman used to rush from her bed to her inbox each morning. The moment she woke, she was already 10 steps ahead, racing to catch up with the day. Her relationship with her partner began to strain, not because of any one argument, but because her presence was never quite there. Her body was in the room, but her mind was already solving problems that hadn't yet happened. She later realized that her habit of skipping over herself in the morning was teaching her nervous system that it was never safe to rest. When she began integrating a few moments of silence, just sitting beside her window, holding a warm cup of tea, looking at the light change, she noticed a shift. Her conversations with her partner grew deeper. Her reactions softened. She began listening, truly listening, not just waiting for her turn to speak, all because she chose to begin her day by meeting herself first. There is a deep spiritual truth in this practice. What you meet in silence becomes your teacher. And often, the lessons we need the most cannot be heard in noise. They are whispered in stillness. This is where the work begins, not with movement, but with the choice to wait, to witness, and to honor the presence of life itself. As the silence unfolds into breath, and breath into motion, the second habit emerges, movement with mindfulness. Many people associate movement in the morning with exercise, with burning calories or pushing limits. But the movement we speak of here is not just for the body. It is for the integration of body and mind. It is not about performance. It is about awareness. Imagine a person standing barefoot in their garden as the sun rises. The grass is cool. The air is fresh. They stretch slowly, not to accomplish a routine, but to listen to the body's language. Where is the tension? What muscles feel stiff? Where is breath shallow or deep? This kind of movement is not rushed. It is intentional. And in this deliberate motion, there is healing. The body holds stories. Every experience not fully processed finds a home in muscle, fascia, and bone. Emotional pain that was suppressed, conversations that were never finished, grief that was never named. These settle into the body. Over time, this creates tightness, not just physically but relationally. We become guarded, not only in posture, but in personality. We struggle to open, not just our shoulders, but our hearts. Mindful movement in the morning begins to unwind these knots. As you stretch with presence, you send a message to your nervous system. It is safe to release. As you move your arms, your spine, your hips with awareness, you are not just increasing blood flow, you are unfreezing emotional patterns that may have lived in you for years. There was a woman who struggled to express herself in her marriage. Every time a difficult topic arose, she shut down. She didn't know why. It was just the way she had always reacted. But when she began incorporating gentle morning movement, slow yoga flows, even 10 minutes of swaying with breath, something shifted. She described it as a softening, not just in her limbs, but in her responses. She began speaking more openly. She cried for the first time in years. Her husband said it felt like he finally saw her. Not because of a conversation, but because of movement that restored the safety in her body. Our emotions are not just mental, they are somatic. That means they live in the body. Anger often sits in the chest, anxiety in the gut, sadness in the shoulders. Morning movement allows you to check in with these places, to meet them, to breathe through them. There is a man in his 50s who shared that every morning he practices a simple walking meditation in silence. No phone, no agenda, just step by step, aware of the ground beneath him. He once said, "I don't walk to go somewhere. I walk to remember that I'm already here." He found that this practice made him less reactive with his teenage son. Fewer arguments, more conversations. The act of moving with awareness in the morning taught him to carry that awareness into relationship. When we move mindfully, we are rehearsing presence. We are training ourselves to feel without judgment, and this habit seeps into every part of our day. You begin to notice your tone in conversation. You sense when your body tenses during disagreement. You become more sensitive to the emotional temperature of a room. All of this begins with a few minutes of conscious motion in the morning. You do not need an expensive routine. You do not need complex systems. You need sincerity. You need consistency. 5 minutes of movement with breath is more valuable than an hour of mechanical exercise done without connection. In fact, one of the greatest forms of movement is one you already know: standing tall, breathing deeply, and lifting your arms as if to greet the sky. In that single motion, you tell the world, I am awake. I am present. I am not running. I am arriving. This type of practice doesn't just shape the body, it shapes the way you meet others. When your body is soft, your words become softer. When your posture is upright, your confidence increases, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that listens. And when you move from presence, you show others what it means to be fully alive. Each gesture becomes a meditation. Washing your face becomes a blessing. Brushing your hair becomes an honoring. Placing your feet on the ground becomes a ceremony of belonging. This is the quiet power of morning movement. It is not loud. It does not demand attention, but it transforms. One breath, one step, one stretch at a time. And with every morning you choose to begin this way, you step closer not only to your potential, but to your essence. You walk not toward success, as the world defines it, but toward the success of being fully and unapologetically yourself. Breath is the only bodily function that bridges both the voluntary and involuntary systems. You can choose to hold it, slow it down, deepen it, or you can forget about it entirely, and it will still go on. But therein lies its hidden power. Because breath is automatic and conscious, it offers a rare opportunity to meet yourself at the intersection of awareness and instinct, and that moment of meeting, the quiet recognition of breath as a living rhythm within you, is a gateway into emotional mastery. There's an old saying, control your breath and you control your mind. Yet many wake up each morning already caught in invisible waves of anxiety. The heart races, thoughts spin, the day hasn't even begun, and already the nervous system is in fight or flight. What we don't often realize is that the mind follows the body. The emotions follow the breath. Shallow breathing signals danger. Deep breathing signals safety. Most arguments, most misunderstandings, most emotional overreactions don't come from a lack of love or intention. They come from dysregulation. A person with a calm breath can hold space for discomfort. A person with erratic breath often turns discomfort into destruction. Imagine a woman who begins her mornings with 10 minutes of conscious breath work. She sits upright, closes her eyes, and inhales slowly through her nose, holds for a few seconds, then exhales through her mouth longer than the inhale. This one act, simple, silent, often unseen by others, becomes a foundation for how she meets the rest of her day. Her tone is different when her partner says something that once triggered her. Her posture changes when her child is upset. Her decision-making slows down enough for wisdom to catch up. She is not just breathing, she is stabilizing. Each breath becomes a way of telling her mind, we are safe, we are here, we can choose. The breath becomes her anchor when conversations get heated. It becomes her refuge when loneliness arises. It becomes her teacher when life doesn't go as planned. This is the essence of emotional discipline. Not suppressing emotion, but creating the internal spaciousness to respond rather than react. And breath is how that space is created. There was once a man who used to lose his temper at the smallest things. His morning routine was rushed, his heart rate high, and by the time he got into a conversation with his spouse or colleague, he was already wound-tight. When he was introduced to conscious breathwork, he was skeptical. How could something as simple as breathing make a difference? But after a few weeks of daily practice, he noticed a shift, not in his circumstances, but in his capacity. When someone criticized him, he didn't snap. When his partner needed emotional support, he didn't withdraw. He began to realize that emotional strength isn't about being hard. It's about being regulated. And breath gave him that. From a scientific perspective, breathwork engages the vagus nerve, the body's internal reset button. Deep, slow breathing stimulates this nerve and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest, digestion, healing. This shift takes you out of survival mode and into connection mode. In relationships, this is everything. A nervous system that feels threatened cannot truly listen. It cannot empathize. It cannot build bridges. But a body grounded in calm breath can. This is why breathwork is not a luxury. It is a necessity, especially in a world that constantly pulls your attention outward. Breath is the call to return inward. Even a few minutes each morning can redirect the trajectory of your interactions. Before the meetings, the conflicts, the emails, the parenting, the expectations, there is breath. A man once described his morning breathwork as the moment I clean the lens through which I see everyone I love. When you breathe with awareness, the mind slows down, the heart softens, and the capacity to love, to forgive, to understand expands. One woman, after a painful divorce, used breathwork as a form of self-soothing. She had lost her sense of safety and trust. Every morning, before her children woke up, she sat quietly in her room and practiced a breathing pattern. Inhale 4 counts, hold 4, exhale 6, hold 2. She did this for 10 minutes daily. Over time, not only did her anxiety reduce, but she began trusting her own presence again. She didn't feel as lost. Her children noticed she smiled more. Her voice became warmer. She no longer lived in reaction to what had happened. She lived in alignment with who she was becoming. Breath invites us into a rhythm deeper than thought. It teaches patience. It trains resilience. It says, feel everything, but be mastered by nothing. Each inhale is an invitation to receive life. Each exhale a chance to release what you no longer need. And in this daily ritual, morning by morning, we restore the most important relationship of all, the one we have with ourselves. And once breath clears the mind, space is created for clarity. That clarity must then be cultivated. It doesn't appear fully formed. It grows through intentional reflection, which brings us to the next sacred habit, journaling, not as documentation, but as liberation. Too many carry the weight of unspoken thoughts. Their minds are filled with loops, conversations they wish they had, words they wish they'd said, fears they try to suppress, dreams they're afraid to believe in. These thoughts don't disappear, they collect. And in the absence of a safe outlet, they turn inward, manifesting as irritability, confusion, emotional detachment. Journaling is the art of giving these thoughts a home outside of your head, so they stop taking up space within it. Clarity journaling each morning is not a diary. It is a practice of mental hygiene. Just as you brush your teeth to prevent decay, you write to prevent emotional clutter. The process is simple, but its effects are profound. Begin with a single page. No rules, no grammar, just presence. Ask yourself 3 guiding questions. What am I feeling right now? What am I holding from yesterday? What do I choose to bring into today? As you write, patterns emerge. You begin to notice the emotional residue that you've been carrying, perhaps anger from a disagreement, disappointment from unmet expectations, or anxiety about a conversation you're avoiding. Putting these to paper doesn't fix them, but it makes them visible. And what is visible can be acknowledged. What is acknowledged can be healed. There is a man who began journaling after his partner told him she felt like he was emotionally absent. He didn't understand. He provided. He was kind. He never raised his voice. But as he began writing each morning, he realized he was emotionally numb, not out of neglect, but out of self-protection. He had never learned how to identify his feelings, let alone express them. Journaling became a bridge. It gave him a language for what he felt, and slowly he began opening up, not just to himself, but to her. Their relationship deepened, not through grand gestures, but through shared understanding. Journaling brings the subconscious to the surface. It helps you trace your triggers. You begin to see that the argument you had last night wasn't just about dishes. It was about feeling unseen. You realize that the tension at work isn't just about deadlines. It's about feeling undervalued. This level of clarity transforms the way you speak, the way you ask for what you need, the way you forgive. A woman who had spent years struggling with perfectionism began journaling every morning to uncover the root. In her entries, she discovered that her need to be perfect came from a childhood belief that love was earned, not given. Seeing this on the page made her cry, but it also made her free. She no longer chased validation. She no longer criticized herself when she made mistakes. Her morning journaling became a sanctuary, one where she was allowed to be real, not perfect. This practice does not require hours. 10 minutes is enough. The point is not to write beautifully, it is to write honestly. Your journal is a place where you can be messy, contradictory, emotional. It is a place without judgment. And in a world that demands constant performance, that kind of space is rare. From a neurological standpoint, journaling activates the prefrontal cortex, the center of reasoning and decision-making, while calming the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system. It creates distance between you and your thoughts. Instead of being swept away by emotion, you observe it. You gain perspective. And that perspective allows you to act with intention rather than habit. In relationships, this clarity is transformative. You stop projecting your fears onto others. You stop needing others to validate what you haven't yet validated in yourself. You begin showing up not as a bundle of unmet needs, but as a person grounded in inner understanding. Conversations become less about blame and more about truth. Conflicts become less about winning and more about resolving. Emotional intimacy deepens, not because you're trying harder, but because you're hiding less. One woman described her morning journaling as the reason she saved her marriage. Not because it solved everything, but because it made her aware of what she actually needed and how often she had been expecting her partner to read her mind. She started asking for things clearly. She stopped punishing him for things he never knew she wanted. The act of writing made her realize that most of her suffering came not from what was happening, but from what remained unspoken. There is a quiet power in clarity. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, but it changes everything. When you begin the day by emptying your mind onto the page, you make room for peace. You create internal space before the demands of life try to fill you up with noise. And in that space, you remember that awareness is your responsibility, that no one can give you clarity if you're unwilling to look inward. Journaling each morning is not an obligation. It is a gift, a mirror, a medicine. And like all medicines, it works best when taken consistently, not perfectly. Day by day, the entries accumulate. And one day, you look back and realize you know yourself, not the version of you shaped by fear or ego, but the real you, the quiet one, the wise one, the one who knew all along what you needed. You just hadn't stopped long enough to listen. Once you have calmed the body through movement, breath, and clarity of thought, there is something that begins to awaken within you. A soft inner direction, not a list of tasks, not external obligations, but something subtler, an inner compass that points toward how you want to feel, who you want to be, and what kind of energy you wish to bring into your day. This is the power of setting purpose each morning. Not goals, not achievements, but a clear emotional and spiritual posture. Too often, people begin the day in reaction. They stumble into tasks, into conversations, into decisions without any preparation of the self. The body is present, but the intention is absent. And when intention is absent, the day is driven by habit. You might accomplish many things, but none of them feel satisfying. You might speak with many people, but none of the conversations feel nourishing. Purpose is what turns routine into ritual. It's what transforms time into transformation. Imagine a man who wakes before his family. He lights a candle in the quiet of his kitchen and asks himself one question: how do I choose to move through today? He writes a single word on a piece of paper: compassion. That word becomes his orientation. Throughout the day, when conflict arises, when stress pulls at him, when misunderstandings appear, he returns to that word. Compassion becomes the lens through which he sees others, and more importantly, through which he sees himself. This kind of intention setting does not require hours of planning. It asks only for sincerity, one word, one energy, one inner vow. But that vow creates coherence between your mind, your emotions, and your behavior. It aligns what you feel with how you act. It anchors you in the midst of storms. Because challenges will come. People will test your patience. Deadlines will press. Disappointments will visit. But if you've already chosen your direction, you don't have to lose yourself in the moment. You return. You remember. There was a woman who struggled with emotional reactivity. Her mornings were often hectic, and by the time she reached work, she was already drained. A coach once asked her, "What if you chose how you wanted to feel before the world told you how to feel?" That question shifted something in her. Every morning, before checking messages or getting dressed, she sat in silence and asked herself, "What do I want to embody today?" Sometimes it was patience. Sometimes it was presence. Sometimes it was simplicity. She said this practice didn't make her day easier, but it made her more stable. And that stability improved her relationships dramatically. She began to speak with more clarity. She became a better listener. She stopped trying to fix others and started understanding them. From a psychological perspective, purpose setting activates the brain's reticular activating system, a network that filters information based on relevance. When you set an emotional intention for the day, your brain begins to notice experiences that support that intention. If you choose gratitude, you start seeing more to be thankful for. If you choose courage, you become more aware of opportunities to speak your truth. This isn't magic. It's biology, but it feels like magic when you realize that your experience of life is being shaped not by what happens, but by how you choose to meet it. In relationships, this is transformative. When you bring purpose into your interactions, you stop reacting from old wounds. You start responding from present values. Instead of arguing to win, you listen to understand. Instead of shutting down in conflict, you stay open. The emotional temperature of your connections begins to shift. Not because the other person changes, but because your presence becomes different. One couple began a practice where they each set a daily relational intention in the morning and shared it with each other. One might say, "Today I choose gentleness." The other might respond, "Today I choose honesty."